Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thanks for joining us for GVITE's second webinar of the year. I guess we'll get this presentation underway now. So we have two great speakers with us today, but before I begin with the introductions, I wanted to quickly remind everyone of our next event. We're going to be partnering with FHWA to host a two-day training session on road safety on May 5th and 6th. So we'll be sending out a newsletter for that with details on this event soon, so stay tuned. And with that out of the way, I am excited to present today's speakers, Fred Lynn and Paul Sandu. Fred Lynn is a senior transportation engineer at the City of Richmond with over 20 years of experience in transportation planning and traffic engineering. He's a registered PTOE with a Master's of Applied Science from UBC, and in his role at the City of Richmond, Fred leads a variety of transportation-related capital project studies and initiatives. Our other speaker, Paul Sandu, is a transportation project leader at the City of Richmond with a variety of experience in municipal engineering and transportation planning, and he is registered as an ASCT with a civil and structural engineering diploma from BCIT. Paul manages and oversees the construction of a variety of Richmond's capital projects. So today, the two of them will be presenting on the City of Richmond's Road Safety Improvement Program. As a quick FYI, this presentation is pre-recorded, so the speakers won't be available for questions during the presentation. However, if you do have any questions about the presentation, Fred and Paul will be happy to answer them after the recording finishes. So please enter any questions you have in the question box. And without further ado, let's listen to Paul and Fred's presentation.
Hi, my name is Fred Lynn. I'm a senior transportation engineer with the City of Richmond. I'm here today with Paul Sandu, who is a transportation project leader with the city. Our presentation today is on City of Richmond's Road Safety Improvement Program, Top 20 Collision-Prone Locations. We are very excited to share with you this key initiative taken by the city in dealing with road safety. Agenda for our presentation today. First, we'll focus on the project background and the objectives. Then we'll describe the study methodology and summarize key findings. We'll then talk about city's road safety improvement program in terms of infrastructure upgrades, as well as fundamental changes in city's approach in road design. We'll then describe the new monitoring effort to gauge the effectiveness of the road safety improvement program. Then we'll conclude the presentation, which will include lessons learned. Background information about the city. Richmond is an island city in the province of BC, located just south of Vancouver. The city is about 20 minutes from downtown Vancouver, 25 minutes from US border, and is the location of Metro Vancouver's International Airport. City's population in 2019 is about 227,000 people, and the population is concentrated in the western portion of the city and in city center. What triggered the need for the study? From 2013 to 2017, there is a substantial increase in vehicle-to-vehicle collisions in the city. In fact, at the study locations, the number of collisions increased 8.7% on an annual basis, which outpaced the population increase of 1.7% per year in the same 5-year time frame. This increase in collision and continued concerns from the public led to the city to take a citywide collision review. City partnered with the Insurance Corporation of BC and hired ISL Engineering and Jeff Ho Engineering consultants to carry out the study. There are two key study objectives. One, we want to identify and prioritize locations in a systematic manner. At the end of the day, we want to make sure the process methodologies are objective, transparent, and easy to understand in how the highest collision-prone locations are identified. Second key objective is to determine what the safety improvements are that will achieve the greatest safety benefit. So with that brief introduction, I will turn the presentation over to Paul, who will be going over the details of the study methodologies. Paul?
Thanks, Fred. The first step of the methodology was the initial screening, which consisted of reviewing ICBC claims data and conducting a safety performance analysis. Based on the standard practice for road safety review studies, ICBC claims data for a 5-year period beginning at the start of 2013 to the end of 2017 was collected and reviewed for the citywide intersections. After removal of the irrelevant collisions, such as at parking lots and unknown locations, over 22,000 claims were identified at 818 intersections, 161 signalized and 657 unsignalized. It was found that 82% of the total collisions occurred at the 161 signalized intersections. Therefore, the study focused on these intersections. Based on the TAC Road Safety Review Guide and previous similar network screening studies in the province, annual collision frequency was selected as the initial safety performance indicator to determine the high collision intersections out of the 161. By applying this safety performance indicator, it resulted in 47 intersections. The 47 intersections accounted for only 29% of the total signalized intersections, yet 65% of the total collisions. For this study, a heat map was developed for the total number of 5-year ICBC claims data at the 47 intersections. Several of the high collision intersections were actually located within the city center. Secondary screening of the 47 intersections consisted of determining the intersections with planned and completed improvements and applying additional safety performance indicators such as collision severity index, collision rate, pedestrian involved collisions, and the highest collision severity index to identify the top 20 collision prone intersections. Traffic volume data for the intersections was collected as well, since it was required to calculate some of the additional safety performance indicators. Intersections with planned modifications and recent improvements completed during the 5-year period for the ICBC claims data were removed. There were a total of 6 intersections out of the 47 high collision intersections identified that were removed. The remaining 41 intersections were further screened based on 3 safety performance indicators. Collision severity index, greater than the city's average of 4.5, which accounts for the collision severity. This resulted in 25 intersections. Collision rate, observed collision rate greater than the critical collision rate, which accounts for the collision pattern randomness. This resulted in 9 intersections. Pedestrian involved collisions greater than 5, which accounts for the vulnerable user safety concerns. This resulted in 6 more intersections, bringing the total to 15. Out of the 47 high collision intersections not yet shortlisted, the top 5 with the highest collision severity index were selected to achieve the top 20 collision-prone intersections. The secondary screening results, noting the safety performance for the top 20 collision-prone intersections, were summarized in this table. For the top 20 collision-prone intersections, the annual collision frequency varied from 25 to 110. The intersection of Garden City and Blundell Road had a low annual collision frequency, yet the highest collision severity index out of the top 20. There were 14 intersections that had collisions involving pedestrians. There was a total of 75 pedestrian-involved collisions for the top 20 intersections. Fatal collisions were found at 8 of the intersections. There was a total of 10 fatalities that occurred for the top 20 intersections. The next step was to conduct field review observations for each of the top 20 collision-prone intersections and identify potential safety issues using the TAC Site Visit Sample Observation Report from the TAC Road Safety Review Guide. The collision analysis for each of the top 20 collision-prone intersections focused on the most recent available 3-year period ICBC claims data to establish the collision patterns. Field observations and safety issues were divided into 5 categories: operational, geometric, traffic signal, vulnerable road users, and other. Examples of operational included significant lane changing and weaving, high vehicle speed, on-street parking, and congestion or long queues. Geometric included things like misalignment of dedicated left turn lanes, horizontal curves before or after the intersection, and driveways near the intersection. Observations and issues related to traffic signal included limited signal visibility, lack of a left turn phase, and long gaps for pedestrian crossing green time after a red signal for vehicles. For vulnerable road users, significant number of pedestrian and cyclists crossing the intersection, long crossing distance for pedestrians, and inconsistent pedestrian and cycling facilities were noted. Others included such things as missing road signs and insufficient lighting. Based on the field review and collision analysis, improvements and the potential safety benefit was identified for each of the top 20 collision-prone intersections. Examples of short-term improvements included adding and improving signage, paving markings, signal modification, improving sightlines, enforcement. Examples of medium long-term improvements included road geometry changes, such as adding or lengthening turning lanes, redesigning channelized right turn islands, or road widening at intersections to add additional lanes or at constrained locations. Also included, part of the road geometry changes would be completing pedestrian and cyclist connections and relocating driveways near the intersection. Given the complexity, a detailed design will be required to determine the exact scope and cost for the recommended medium and long-term improvements at the top 20 intersections. Intersection safety review reports were prepared for each of the top 20 collision-prone intersections. The reports included information about the intersection, a photo, collision stats, field review results, potential improvements, and the safety benefits. Study findings were presented to Richmond City Council in June of 2019. Council approved funding of $500,000 to implement short-term improvements at all the top 20 locations. As of today, approximately 75% of the program is complete, and the remainder is to be completed by the end of Q1 2021. These short-term improvements are expected to reduce collisions by 5 to 30%. The following is an example of a short-term improvement. This is number 4 road in Blundell. It is ranked as number 12 of the top 20 locations. It is a typical 4-legged intersection in the city. Average collision is over 42 collisions in a year with a severity index of 5.6. The study found that there is a high portion of collisions involving left turn opposing traffic. The solution was to convert existing center lanes, which was a shared through left turn lane, to left turn only lanes in the eastbound and westbound directions at a cost of approximately $25,000. The anticipated collision reduction is 10 to 20%. Richmond City Council also approved the following: funding of $600,000 to carry out designs and confirm the project scope for the medium and long-term improvements at all 20 locations. The designs are currently underway and are expected to be completed by Q2 2021. Council also approved a multi-year capital program for implementation of these improvements with a budget of $2.8 million for 2020 and $12 million for 2021 to 2025. The following is an example of medium and long-term improvements. This is number 5 road and Cambie Road. It is ranked as number 6 of the top 20 locations. The average annual collision is just over 76 collisions in a year, with a severity index of 4.87. The study found that there is a high portion of collisions involving left turn opposing traffic. As a 2020 capital project, the scope includes reconstructing the entire intersection to add a new left turn lane on each of the intersection approach. Also, we'll be providing multi-use pathway connections at the intersection, which will align with the city's OCP. The detailed design is currently underway, and construction is scheduled to commence in late 2021 at a cost of $2.8 million, and 50% of that will be funded by TransLink. It is anticipated that with these improvements, we could be seeing a reduction of 40% in collisions. As part of the city's capital program, the following 2 intersections have been approved by Richmond City Council for 2021. The first is number 2 Road and Westminster Highway. It is ranked as number 3 of the top 20 intersections. The scope includes adding a second left turn bay and extending the existing left turn lane storage at the westbound approach, redesigning the existing channelized right turn lane at the northwest corner, and traffic signal modifications. The other intersection is number 4 Road and Cambie Road. It is ranked as number 13 of the top 20 intersections. The scope for this intersection includes adding left turn bays at all 4 legs of the intersection. The detailed design for these 2 intersections is to commence in late 2021, with construction expected to commence in late 2022. The potential safety benefit ranges from 40 to 80%. The total cost for both intersections is $3 million, and 50% will be funded by TransLink. I will now turn the presentation back over to Fred, who will go over the city's safety initiatives, monitoring program, and the lessons learned from the study. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. In addition to the road safety improvements that Paul has talked about, the city also started a new capital program in 2020 to remove or modify right turn channelization islands. The objective of the program is to reduce right turn vehicle speed, mitigate the conflicts between pedestrians and right turning vehicles. The new program has a dedicated funding of $800,000 to $1 million per year, and the target is to upgrade 2 to 3 locations every year. The city started with locations that have the highest pedestrian conflicts and activities. In 2020, Channelized Islands at 2 locations were identified for removal. The picture below shows one of the locations, which you can see that the existing Channelized Island is relatively small with limited refuge area for pedestrians. The figure on the bottom right shows the proposed enhancement involving the removal of the Channelized Island as well as converting the existing pedestrian crossing operation so that all pedestrian movements at the intersection are controlled by the traffic signal. In addition to capital infrastructure projects, the city has made changes in its road design approach, including changing or reducing the curb return radii requirements. And this is to address conflicts between pedestrians and right turn vehicles by slowing down right turning vehicles at intersections. Changing the curb return radii also provide additional pedestrian refuge areas at intersections. The updated curb return radii requirements were incorporated into city design specs in August 2019. The other key change is road dieting, where in all new capital projects, or retrofit of existing roadways, road dieting opportunities are pursued. And this is intended to deal with the chronic speeding issues that we observed along arterial roads. For example, as part of a planned cycling network expansion project for a new 4.8 kilometer off-road multi-use pathway along Stevenson Highway, the existing roadway will be reconstructed with road diet measures comprised of narrower lane width and intersection treatments to enhance the safety of vulnerable road users. Other changes in road design approach include an increased focus on providing physical protection for the vulnerable road users. And this is pursued in all new capital projects, as well as retrofit of any existing roadways. The other change is the more use of the emerging technology. As an example, we started using automated traffic conflict analysis with captured video data at intersections to help predict, diagnose, and address road safety issues, including near misses. And this allows us to implement any measures that are otherwise not obvious or identifiable in the traditional safety analysis. To gauge the effectiveness of the safety initiatives, the city will be monitoring vehicle speeds on high-speed corridors continuously 24/7 with the use of cameras as well as reader boards. The city has a very ambitious goal to have a total of just under 130 locations equipped with cameras and speed reader boards by end of this year. And these locations will be capable of measuring and recording vehicle speeds. And we are looking at future installation at additional 70 locations for cameras over the next 10 years as we continue to expand our fiber optic network. In addition, to monitor the effectiveness of the safety initiatives, we'll be carrying out after studies to assess the effectiveness of the implemented safety improvements in reducing the frequency and severity of collisions. And also, our intention is to update every 3 to 5 years of the network screening studies that was done in 2019. Lessons learned. We find that there was a lot of effort that went into collecting data and best practice research. Therefore, early planning and coordination was necessary to meet the project timeline. Also, what we found was that early engagement with the key stakeholders and public is critical. This is important because it would develop a sense of ownership of the project by the key stakeholders. Also, by talking to the public early on in the project, we were able to capture localized issues or concerns that were not identified in the safety analysis. The key project benefits, at the end of the day, this project was deemed very successful by the city because the data-driven analysis enabled the city to prioritize in an objective manner where the funding should be put towards. And also, this project justified to the public and the elected officials as to why certain locations are given priority over others. So that concludes our presentation today, and Paul and I will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
So thanks for listening to the presentation, everyone. I know I really enjoyed that. Hopefully you did too. I guess we can start with our Q&A session now. So I guess I'll start with one quick question from myself. Yeah, Paul and Fred, when you guys were using when you guys were looking at crash data, did you only use ICBC data, or did you consider using RCMP crash data as well?
Yeah, so the RCMP crash data was considered, but it was found that it was quite a bit lower than the ICBC data. That's typically due to the fact that RCMP would only attend crash sites if there was a fatality or serious injury or had a major impact on traffic. So keeping in line with other network screening studies that have been completed in the region, our main focus was on the ICBC data.
Awesome. We also have one more question from Sean O'Sullivan. He asked, at number 4 Road and Blundell, did you consider adjusting the lane alignments to accommodate positive offset left turn lanes so left turning vehicles are not sightline obstructions? And he was mentioning this because Coquitlam has done this at a number of intersections and received positive feedback.
So I'll take that one. Absolutely. So we have considered various options, and our approach is to the changes that you've seen out there is what we consider to be short-term improvements. So it's something that can be done very quickly. In fact, when you look at the timeline of the improvements, the study was done in 2019, and the improvements were done by end of last year. So really, what we want to do is get something out there as soon as possible, and any further lane changes or how we realign the lanes are being considered as part of the medium to short term to long term improvement process.
Awesome. Okay, we have another question from Kathy Ho. She asked, Fred, I wasn't sure if you mentioned, but what is the traffic capacity impact, i.e. the delay, associated with the removal of the right turn channelized islands? And is that going to be an issue in the long term for the City of Richmond?
Yeah, so absolutely. Again, as part of the development of the medium and long-term improvements, traffic analysis would be conducted to assess the impact of any channelized island removal. We haven't really landed on whether it's going to be complete removal or modification of the channelized islands. The initial findings is that in more of the city center area where we have a lot of pedestrian activities, the priority will be try to remove those islands. Whereas, more at outside city center or at locations with lower pedestrian activities, there may be a bit more focus on retain the existing channelized island, but to improve it so that it's more similar to the smart channelizations, as an example, coming from TAC.
Great. Anna Varhog, and sorry if I pronounced your name wrong there, Anna. She said, thank you for the great presentation. Significant benefits have been identified. And she also said, can you speak to how the study benefits were quantified?
Sure, I can take that one, and maybe if Paul has any additional information. So the city retained ISO and also JEFO engineering, and part of their task is to figure out the safety benefits for each of the recommended improvements. And they went through a literature research and also best industry practice review to come up with the potential safety reduction for each of the safety measures.
Erica Geddes asked, which stakeholders were the most helpful in identifying issues and or solutions? And also, just out of curiosity, since I think I might have missed this, but who did you end up consulting with as far as stakeholders go?
We talked to various stakeholders. For example, ICBC, it's actually jointly funded the network screening study, as well as through their annual road safety improvement programs. They have provided some funding towards the improvements identified. So ICBC was a key stakeholder. TransLink was a key stakeholder as well, because many of the top 20 locations were on the TransLink's MRN network. And also the province of Ministry of Infrastructure and Transportation Infrastructures was a key stakeholders as well for locations that are jointly under the, joint jurisdiction between by the city and the ministry. And other stakeholders include the public. I'm trying to think if there's anyone else. I believe those are the key stakeholders. Paul, do you have anyone else that you can think of?
No, I think that was it. I think with the public, I think we did an open house, which was presented as part of that.
Did you find a lot of the feedback from the public positive on that note, or did they actually have a lot of kind of solutions that they could provide to you, or things that you hadn't thought about before?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think
So
yeah, sorry, go ahead, Fred.
go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I think at a few locations, the public did identify issues that they were experiencing. So as part of the medium and long-term improvement, we are taking those into account as well to make sure that we do address, well, first we analyze it to determine that their issues are valid, and then figure out ways to actually mediate them and provide solutions to correct those issues.
Awesome, that's great to hear. Okay, so our next question is from Thomas Thivener, and he asked, why does Richmond use wheelchair ramps or letdowns that are only wide enough for single file? And he said this is problematic where pathways cross at intersections.
I would take a stab at that one. So any new cycling infrastructures where there's multi-use pathway, then Richmond does use a wider wheelchair ramp to allow for the modes of transportation that's intended. I guess Thomas is correct in identifying that the existing wheelchair ramps, many of them were not designed to accommodate the multi-modes of transportation, including cyclists, for example, cyclists.
Yeah, but more or less in the future then, as the city of Richmond builds out and reconstructs things, that issue should largely be addressed then.
Absolutely. If you look at one of the major street retrofit project in the city, that was along number 3 road. All the wheelchair ramps are basically designed so that you can have, they are really wide in terms of the letdown area. And, those are intended to design, those are designed for the multi-use pathway along along number 3 road.
Awesome. Okay, so our next question is from Stephen Gardner, and he asked, what was the source of estimates of reductions in collisions? And then he had CMFs in brackets. So your collision modification factors.
I don't have the specific reference on that at this time. Perhaps that's something that we can provide after this presentation.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. We can always send out a quick email to the group after. Okay, so our next question is from Brandon Green, and he said, when changing your standard curb radii, did you also revise your standard design and control vehicles?
So our engineering design specs does not include any indication of the design vehicles. So the short answer to that question is the design vehicles at any intersection is determined on a case-by-case basis. So for example, one of the locations where we identified for the removal of the channelization islands, the design vehicles includes buses because there are some bus movements at that locations, as well as semi-trailers. But semi-trailers, instead of our traditional approach is to design for semi-trailers to go from curb lane to curb lane, where our current approach is to design so that they can go into the adjacent lanes to make them maneuver.
Okay, so our next question is from Marcus Chan. He asked, has Richmond considered adding protected left turn phases to address intersections with higher left turn collisions?
Absolutely. So, and that's the intent of this study, in that, traditionally we address safety issues as they arise, whereas the objective of the Top 20 project is to kind of look at the city on a, kind of holistically to determine what is the most important location to deal with. And if through this review, if left turn collisions is deemed to be the predominant collision type that needs to be dealt with, definitely that's one of the mitigation measures considered.
So do you think going forward, this study, as a bit of a follow-up question, do you think going forward, this study will kind of help potentially identify collision issues before new intersections get built or things get recreated? So for example, like, say you're building out a new area or a new subdivision, you'll preemptively add in some of these measures because you'll actually have some of that data from the past being like, okay, these are issues that we ran into and we can resolve them kind of preemptively.
Absolutely, that's the intent of the project. In that any new capital projects, will be, as we mentioned in the presentation, any new capital project will be looking for opportunities to design the roadway so that hopefully it does not lead to the chronic speeding issues that we observe on a typical Richmond roadway. It's interesting because I talked to, I believe, one of the someone from North Vancouver just this week about a new roadway that was built in Richmond, the River Parkway project. Essentially, it's designed so that it's a long stretch of roadways, roughly about 1 kilometer in length. But there are a lot of design features to discourage people from speeding. So that's, the inclusion of those features are basically from the study findings and also from some of the lessons learned that we know of other locations.
Oh, that's great to hear. So it's almost kind of turning into somewhat of a Vision Zero then to some degree, where you guys will be preemptively going out and making safety improvements where you can.
Yeah, and that's an interesting question because Richmond does not have a formal Vision Zero program. And certainly there's some debate and interest for Vision Zero program in the city. Our view is that Richmond is already doing many things that are similar to Vision Zero. Just as an example, the presentation that today on the safety improvement program. Our view is that this program will result in safer roads for all road users, and also because of this road safety improvement program, which resulted in committed capital funding towards safety improvements, and also fundamental changes in how road designs are carried out in the city, with a particular focus on protecting the vulnerable road users. This program will certainly make the roads in Richmond safer and reduce serious and fatal collisions, and which are similar to the desired outcome of a typical Vision Zero program.
Yeah. So effectively, this program meets a lot of the intended goals of the Vision Zero program. So it's kind of like, why do you need a separate plan as well if you're already kind of achieving this then?
Yeah, and our desire is to do something as quickly as we can. And we thought that through this program, we are able to convince the public and the council, and therefore the committed funding towards short-term improvements. And to our delight, they were really supportive in terms of the investments towards the medium and long-term improvements as well.
Oh, that's great to hear. Okay, so
Sorry,
our next question.
sorry, Kevin.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, the other thing too is like there's some intersections where I still identified right turn collisions to be on the high end. So they've recommended, reducing the curb returns. So instead of just focusing or reducing the curb return at the one location, we figure we might as well do it for the entire intersection.
Yeah.
We're kind of taking a global approach, even though curb returns or right turn vehicle collisions can be low at the intersections at certain corners. We're trying to upgrade all the intersections at one time.
Yeah.
Even though they've identified where the inadequate lighting could be a cause for collisions at the intersection. We're taking a global approach and looking at all the top 20 intersections and focusing on upgrading the lighting at all 20 intersections. So we're taking more of a global approach, not just basically if they've identified one issue at one certain location, we're trying to apply
Yeah,
that everywhere.
that's great. That's great to hear. It seems like it'll have good long-term benefits then. Okay, so our next question is from Rosemary Draskovich, and she asked, she wanted to know what methodology you use to select mitigation measures and identify the anticipated collision reductions.
So ISL and JEFO consultants, so they carry out collision analysis, collision claims analysis, as well as the field reviews, and also looking at the collision claims data in identifying the safety issues. And then the safety improvements were identified with the focus to identify, again, short term, something that we can do immediately, and then more of the long term and medium to long term improvements. To quantify the effectiveness of the safety measures, again, it was based on the literature research. Unfortunately, I don't have the reference, the name of the reference with me today. Maybe that's something I can provide after this presentation.
Sure. Okay, so our next question is from Margaret Gibbs, and she asked, did stakeholders include police?
Yes, thank you for the reminder. Actually, RCMP was a key stakeholder, and in fact, we actually shared the results of the study with them.
Our next question is from Marcus Chan, and he said, I have noticed Richmond has implemented yellow ADA tiles and strips at many of the new letdown locations. How has the feedback been from the community?
I don't believe I've heard any negative feedbacks yet. So I would say that the feedback has been neutral. Yeah, I haven't heard any negative feedback, in fact. So, we must be doing something right there.
Okay, so our next question is from Anna Varhog, and she asked, how did the #1 road and Moncton intersection perform considering non-traditional traffic control at that intersection? And maybe as a precursor, you can explain a little bit about why it's non-traditional, since I personally don't know that intersection.
Well, I can start.
Well,
so
go for it.
I was just gonna say that it's there's a scramble phase. So there's
Okay.
a pedestrian phase at the intersection. Now, I don't know where the location fits on our list of prioritized locations. I believe the location is actually outside the top 47. So it was not selected for analysis at all.
Okay, so it was already considered a relatively safe location then.
It was. I think I will quantify that statement by saying that it's not the top 20 locations or top 47 locations in the city.
Okay. Our next question is from Julio Wong, and he said, thank you for the presentation. Removal of right island channelizations definitely result in improved, actually this is more of just a statement, but he's agreeing with you in that the removal of right turn island channelizations result in improved safety for pedestrians and cyclists. So that's good to know there's agreement. And our next question is from Justin Ng, and he said, can you speak to the role of enforcement for improving safety, i.e. the use of RCMP or red light and speeding cameras and other technologies, and was this part of the project?
Yes, so maybe Paul can help me out a little bit on the details. So out of the top 20 locations, I believe close to probably 10 to 13 locations were identified where speeding was an issue.
Yeah, I think it's about 13.
About 13. And because of that, and I believe only one of the 13 locations was equipped with red light camera. And also, so one of the things that we did out of the study was we actually requested the province to step up on their speed enforcement and red light camera program at those locations where speeding was determined to be an issue. Paul, do you have anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I think the red light cameras, I think that falls under ICBC's jurisdiction, and then the speed enforcement would fall under RCMP. So we're working closely with those two stakeholders to see where we can actually implement it and get this done.
So have any cameras been implemented to date, or are you still waiting to hear back on that from ICBC and the RCMP?
I believe one location is already equipped with the by the province, and then I think the province approach is that they need to review the province holistically as well. But the locations were identified and they are aware of those locations.
Okay, that's good to hear. Okay, so our last question is from Sean O'Sullivan, and he said, being close to the airport, did the review identify any improvements related to visitors traveling to and from the airport that may help with wayfinding for travelers not familiar with the city?
Yeah, so I mean, our focus was on intersections that are controlled by the city. So once you head towards YVR, a lot of the intersections there are actually under YVR jurisdiction, so they weren't considered as part of the citywide network.
Okay. Okay, so that looks like that was our last question. Unless anyone else has anything to, oh, just as I say that, I got one more question or one more comment. Jeff Ho, actually, he said the references for the collision modification factors can be found at cmfclearinghouses.com. So kind of getting back to that earlier question about where they came from, that's the reference that you were looking for. And yeah, I guess if we don't have anything else, we will end our presentation here, and we'll give Paul and Fred a big thank you for presenting today. So yeah, thank you very much, Paul and Fred. I appreciate it, and I know I had a great time listening to the presentation.